Joining me now is David Clement. He is with the Consumer Choice Center. Mr. Clement, I guess the main question is, how will plain packaging be a disadvantage to the consumer? How does this hurt the consumer?
So it hurts the consumer because for cannabis, for legal cannabis, most people are going to be new to that particular product, and all people are going to be new to this legal market. And plain packaging prevents companies from, one, having brands, and brands associate all sorts of different impacts and value, but more importantly, desired impact. So a cannabis product that, let's say, is ideal for dealing with headaches or has some other desired impact, it will actually be prohibited for these companies to include any of that information on the package. And what we advocate for and what we want is as much information on the package as possible so that consumers can make informed decisions. And that matters obviously for consumer choice, but it also matters for consumer safety, because we don't want people purchasing products and not knowing what the impact is going to be, or purchasing products where they think the impact is going to be X and it's actually Y.
Okay, the government says what's essential for people is the type or the strain of marijuana, the name and the content of THC and the other active ingredients, CBD, CBD, and that's all that's important. And then anything beyond that, endorsements, claims, and things like that, they are prohibiting because they're saying that's not germane and it could actually be misleading. How do you respond to that?
So I think there's a strong body of evidence to establish that many of these claims are not misleading. If a company were making misleading claims, that would be fraud. That would be penalized regardless of what these regulations are. So if you have a product and you're saying it's a miracle product and it can cure something that it can't, obviously that's fraud and you should be penalized for it. And so when they say that this is all the information that you need, from our perspective, we don't buy it because a lot of people don't really know the difference between THC and CBD. Right. If they go into a store and they see a product that is heavy on THC, they have to understand that that is the compound that's going to make them high, as opposed to heavy in CBD, which is the compound that can alleviate various ailments and things like that. And so when we have brands tied to these products and when we have this information available, it allows for consumers to make a more informed decision.
What about, though, I mean, because a lot of this plain packaging is also related to drugs, and these two active ingredients are drugs. Sure. And the government says, though, that, for example, when it comes to advertising a drug, you cannot make claims that it's good for this and good for this without it being the product of a peer-reviewed scientific study, a medicinal study, a medical study that has been peer-reviewed and that has been done on a large scale, and that they're basically just trying to cut to the chase and to protect consumer safety by giving just the basics, which is the THC content and the CBD content.
And I think what the problem with that analysis from the government side is that there is a strong body of peer-reviewed evidence in terms of the usefulness of cannabis. But what they should be allowed to do is, beyond what's peer-reviewed, simply to be able to simply state what some of these desired impacts are, which are not medical claims. They're more direct information from producer to consumer so that they're not making mistakes in terms of the products that they're purchasing.
Are you also pitching for more elaborate packaging? Because this plain packaging is going to be applicable soon to tobacco as well, and your group has been involved in lobbying against the plain packaging for tobacco. Are you pitching for a return, or in this new product, cannabis, fancy packaging and for existing producers, for example, who can have sort of brand names and packaging that could catch the eye?
Yeah, we certainly think that branding is important. The way that I always frame this is we allow for these we allow for brands and package marketing for alcohol. And so based on that established principle alone, we don't see any justification for having heavy-handed regulations on a significantly less harmful or relatively benign product like cannabis. And so we allow for alcohol companies to have packaging on their cases of beer and all of these other items that allow for people to identify and have brand awareness. And so what we want is we want a system that encourages that information sharing, and branding is certainly a part of it.
Is this also coming from existing pot producers who will now be legal. For example, one of your contributors that you listed on your website is Tokyo Smoke, which is identified as a cannabis company.
Sure.
Is this from also existing producers who would like to be able to advertise, like the tobacco companies, they like to have their brand on a package? Yeah. Is this what this is about as well?
So it depends. There are some companies in the space who are opposed to the Health Canada proposed regulations, the plain packaging mandate, but there are some who are in favor of it. And it's certainly not something that unites the industry. And we're not advocating on behalf of the industry, we're advocating on behalf of consumers. And so there's an important distinction
there.
But
when you have one of your contributors sure. is an existing cannabis company, sure. are they partly behind it? I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying that, and that is we are also making a pitch for companies who would like to have glossy advertising. Yeah,
I mean, I can't actually speak to where they stand on this issue because I don't know. That's not how we operate. We have editorial control over everything we do. Yeah. So it's not something where we actually consult with industry or business to see what their point of view is on this, because we are a consumer-focused group.
Last question, we're 5 days from legalization. Is there any chance that your position is going to be heard by the government? The regulations haven't been published, but the industry is going ahead with this plain packaging. Mm-hmm.
I hope so. What we've done over the last 2 months is unite consumers who are impacted by plain packaging mandates, whether that be cigars, cigarettes, and now cannabis. They've been emailing their members of parliament and voicing their concerns. And we hope that that outrage at least gets some discussion going in terms of what's appropriate here and what's not. And right now, we don't feel like that voice has been heard. Whether or not it's going to happen in the next 5 days the jury is obviously still out on that one. But I'm hopeful that maybe we can avoid making some of the mistakes that other legal jurisdictions have made, where they have these heavy-handed regulations and then they realize that they're silly and they have to claw them back. I'd prefer to just not make those mistakes from day one.
Last question. Is this just a moot point in, say, Canada's most populous province, Ontario? 12 million mm-hmm. people in Ontario won't be able to buy anything in a storefront for another 6 to 8 months. Mm-hmm. So that's all going to be bought by the internet, and so by a catalog type pitch. Is this a moot point when you're buying things by catalog?
To some extent, it could be. I don't necessarily think that everyone is going to transition to purchasing it from the Ontario Cannabis Store and the online outlet in that year before private retail happens. I think that most consumers will continue to buy in the black market, which is a problem. That's actually one of the biggest issues with the Ontario rollout, is that private retail is much more consumer friendly. Uncapping private retail stores is a big win for consumer choice, but having that gap means that the people who currently consume cannabis are most likely going to continue to buy it illegally. So it may be a moot point or on pause until we have those storefronts in Ontario, but we will have storefronts elsewhere across the country, and so it certainly impacts consumers in other provinces.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in to speak with us.
Appreciate it.